Good afternoon, Jink enthusiasts. My name is... Sorry, I think I had something caught in my throat. It's that time of the year again, duelists. A format warping set is upon us, Malice has Yugioh Master Duel up in flames, a second Hungry Burger is at the TCG, and people are complaining again that the game is dead. However, perhaps more than ever before, the reason behind everybody's doom posting might actually carry some merit. For those out of the loop, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been hit in the last few months with a ton of major concerns from both sellers and the player base. These issues include the poor performance of mainline sets, the loss of the mid-core Yu-Gi-Oh! Player, the threat that Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel seemingly poses towards the paper game, Konami's recent hostility towards the Time Wizard community, and an issue that has been recently dubbed the new player problem. All of these issues put together have put the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG in an incredibly volatile position, and frankly, something needs to be done about it before it's too late. So in today's video, I'll lay out what each of these problems are one by one and try to diagnose why they're contributing to the decline of the paper card game. And at the end of this video, I'll not only provide what needs to be done, but also explain why we as a community can't fully rely on Konami to solve this. Given my track record when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! Discussions, I'm probably going to upset a ton of the modern player base with this video. But considering that I'm 2 years wiser now, and have even been independently working on my own alternative format alongside a more seasoned player of the game, I think I'm in a better position now to offer a solid take on this discussion. For the regulars on my channel, this video is a prelude to the alternate format video that's currently in the works. That project will hopefully drop later in a month or two and will follow my normal editing style. This video is just something I had to get out of my system, especially after MBT's Doom post video about Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. So with all that out of the way, here's why Yu-Gi-Oh! Has to change. The value of Yu-Gi-Oh! Sets is a discussion that's been talked to death ever since I began playing the game in 2021. For those who aren't really tuned into the modern game, Yu-Gi-Oh! Sets basically live or die by their meta relevance. The high rarity slots in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Set are usually occupied by meta-defining cards, and more often than not, they're the cards that sell the best. Where Yu-Gi-Oh! Begins to differ from Magic the Gathering or other card games is the way that Yu-Gi-Oh! Structures their sets. In a 30-pack Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy booster box, for example, you're guaranteed to pull about 30 rares and 4 mythics. That's basically the equivalent of 30 ultra rares and 4 secret rares in a single box. And on top of that, you're still bound to find cards in uncommon rarity that still see experimentation in decks. However, in a 24-pack Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist Advanced booster box, you're basically guaranteed to have about 4 ultra rares and 2 secret rares. Now the problem with this is that when you're buying a Yu-Gi-Oh! Set, these cards are only being considered for the standard format, which is advanced. So as a result, a lot of the cards in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Set that aren't meta-relevant are functionally just pack filler that won't ever see play. On top of this, most of these cards won't even go well together, and because of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s archetype-driven card design, you probably won't even pull enough packs to build a functional deck. As a result, pulling packs in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Set always feels pretty awful, and there's not much that can be done about this without altering how Konami structures sets. Now, because of how Konami has designed their products and shaped its player base, it's created this problem where a new Yu-Gi-Oh! Product pretty much has to shake up the meta or increase power creep in order for it to be remotely successful. If it doesn't do either of these things, then the set will just rot on store shelves. Moreover, because of the awful rarity distributions and how all the cards people need for their decks are often locked behind max rarities, it means that distributors won't ever even sell entire boxes. Most players in this community tend to buy single cards. Normally this is something that you would only really see among the smaller, dedicated competitive player base of your game. But because these sets only appeal to competitive players, they're entirely dependent on the meta of the game. And this leads us to our next problem. So this is an issue that was discussed at length by Yu-Gi-Tuber Paul from Team APS. But the short of it is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't really provide a space for the intermediate level player. The mid-core player is someone who likes to build non-meta decks, someone that isn't fully invested in following the meta. If you're a DDD or Burning Abyss player, you most likely fall into this category. These are people that are often dedicated to a certain theme or archetype, regardless of whether or not it's currently meta. And when they go to locals, they're the kind of player that just wants to have fun with their deck of choice. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is incredibly unforgiving to this type of player, regardless of if they're playing the paper game or Master Duel. The game at its core just isn't really designed with them in mind. More often than not, the advanced format consists of a very tight meta where only one deck or a handful of decks can even play comfortably. If you're playing a rogue deck, then you have to work that much harder just to see results. And it's even worse if your deck isn't even meta relevant. It's not too dissimilar to a fighting game, and much like a fighting game, I don't actually have a problem with this. I think it's good for the competitive space that Konami isn't spreading the format too thin all the time. And while I love incredibly diverse formats like Dune and Agov, I have to admit that they're hard to balance. The issue I have is that there isn't a space for the midcore player to enjoy their decks in peace outside of the kitchen table experience, and that has mostly been supplanted by Master Duel. More on that later. Now, for what it's worth, this is an issue that Konami has recognized and attempted to address with a format known as Heart of the Underdog. The basic premise of this format, if you could even call it one, is that the top tier decks in the current meta are banned at the OTS store's discretion, and from there you're allowed to play any deck that doesn't contain these restricted archetypes. The goal is to allow people to play non-meta decks, and for what it's worth, it succeeds at that. On paper. An issue lies in the fact that you may want to play with an archetype that is currently meta, but you want to do so in a non-meta capacity. Let's say, hypothetically, that Azumina were an archetype that was on the restriction list, and you wanted to build a goofy Azumina Hungry Burger list. All of a sudden now, that list is off the table and you'll have to play some other Hungry Burger deck like Pure Novellas or a Dogmatica brew. The format just feels like a cop-out, and doesn't actually address the problem with the modern game, which is that there isn't a place where you can just take any deck and have fun. Heart of the Underdog at the end of the day is still basically the sweaty Yu-Gi-Oh tournament experience, just without the decks that are currently meta. I may as well just play Master Duel at that point because that's essentially what this is, which transitions to our third talking point.
You're kidding me!
This isn't really as much of a problem as people like MBT are making it out to be. But to summarize, there's concern among the player base that Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel is stunting the growth of the paper card game. The way I see it, the people playing Master Duel are those who weren't ever going to invest hundreds of dollars into cardboard to begin with. But before I tear apart this belief, we'll play devil's advocate first. Let's assume the player base is right and that the decline of the TCG has been exacerbated by Master Duel. It is true that the active number of people that are playing the digital card game is honestly impressive. The game often has somewhere between 20,000 to 70,000 players on at any given time, and it has a pretty forgiving free-to-play model if you're just trying to maintain a single deck. This game is a fucking phenomenon compared to the TCG, and it shows in the amount of YouTube channels that almost only make Yu-Gi-Oh content now about Master Duel. Some notable examples of this would be the VTuber Nova Aokami, my friend Jesse Perez, Hardleg Gaming, who used to be a normal Yu-Gi tuber, and the incredibly popular Team Samurai X1. But on top of that, most people from outside the normal Yu-Gi tuber sphere tend to stream or upload videos on Master Duel whenever they want to make Yu-Gi-Oh content, and that mostly just has to do with the fact that it's easier to broadcast. It's understandable why Master Duel has this perception of being vastly more popular given that people make a lot of Master Duel content online. And it makes sense why players believe that this is a major factor in the paper game's decline. So now allow me to tear apart this perception in a single sentence. Why hasn't the same thing happened to Pokemon or Magic the Gathering? Magic the Gathering Arena is also a pretty popular game that gets a ton of online attention. It's not exactly on the same level as Master Duel, but it's pretty fucking close. But despite that, people still go out and buy sealed Magic products. Hell, I personally spent more money than I'm willing to admit on the recent Final Fantasy stuff. I know, I have a problem. The point I'm trying to reach is that Master Duel has nothing to do with the TCG's success or failure, and this is something that both the player base and even Konami have misidentified as a problem. The idea that you're going to be able to consistently translate free-to-play players over to a game where you're regularly spending, oh god. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous, no matter how you want to try and spin that. Ideally, we should be looking at ways to bring down the cost of singles, but beyond that, we need to accept that it's unrealistic that we'll ever be able to perfectly translate Master Duel players over to the paper game. Online play aside, Master Duel has a monetization system that feels a lot less predatory than both Duel Links and even the paper game. The fact of the matter is that you're never going to get those players to sink hundreds of dollars into cardboard. Ideally, Yu-Gi-Oh TCG products should sell just about as much as Magic the Gathering's products, since that's their direct competition. I think worrying about Master Duel as much as we are just isn't productive whatsoever. And you know what else isn't productive for the growth of the game? For those of you who aren't familiar with me, I used to play Super Smash Bros. For years growing up. I not only played the game with friends almost every day, but I grew up watching competitive Melee players like Mewtwo King, Hungrybox, and Mango. While I never really played Melee, spectating the era of the Five Gods was a cornerstone of my childhood experience, and to this day I still love watching Melee tournaments. So when I heard that Yu-Gi-Oh was experiencing a revival of their older formats like Goat and Edison, I felt really good about those communities. Personally, I don't believe that the popularity of those formats will translate over to more people playing the modern game, but that shouldn't really matter at the end of the day. People should be allowed to play those formats, full stop. So given all that, you can probably imagine how upset I was when Konami began trying to push modern rules and card erratas onto these older formats. This is basically like if Nintendo were to re-release Melee today with a ton of balance patches. It would just be a complete shit show for everybody involved. There's just no good reason for Konami to do this. On top of that, people are just really confused about why this is even happening to begin with. The most plausible reason is that Konami is planning to roll out Time Wizard game modes into Master Duel, and they aren't able to make it one-to-one with the TCG due to engine limitations. Frankly, I think that's a horrible reason to try and sandbag these grassroots communities, but it at least lines up with how Konami normally acts as a business. Regardless of why they're doing this, I just think it's awful to tell people how they're allowed to use the cards that they own. If people want to get together and play older Yu-Gi-Oh with their older cards, they should be allowed to do that. They're ultimately a minority within the overall Yu-Gi-Oh community. You should just leave them alone. Konami has more pressing issues to address anyways, which brings us to our final point of discussion. This is a topic that's been covered to death over the last few years, but was recently brought to light again by YouTuber Yugioh TCG. The new player problem is a phenomenon that pertains to the game's inability to gain and retain new players. Personally, I don't think this has anything to do with the game's complexity. Yugioh Master Duel has proven that it's possible to get people into this game as a new player. It does often require some help, but once you know what you're doing, you can maneuver the game on your own and begin playing against all of Yu-Gi-Oh's different decks and archetypes. No, what I think the new player problem really boils down to are a few things. The paper game's onboarding process, the frequency of new products, the price of the game, Konami's refusal to reduce the game's power ceiling, and the lack of other formats aside from Advanced. First off, it's really hard to teach people how to play the paper game. Obviously, if you're coming into the TCG with knowledge from Master Duel, all you have to do is learn how to play everything manually. But if you don't have any experience with Yu-Gi-Oh whatsoever, it's a million times harder. Konami has tried to resolve this with products, like the 2-player starter set, but I think it's only made this problem a lot worse. Secondly, there's way too much product and it's all really expensive. Like, you have to admit that dropping a new set every 1 to 2 months is fucking exhausting. And this isn't just a Yu-Gi-Oh issue. Games like Magic and Pokemon also put out sets way too frequently. Like, we aren't made of money. Third, there's the power level of the game. I'm not saying we should just completely crater the game and bring it back to Edison levels of power creep, but I do think that one-card combos and the end boards that they produce are getting a little out of hand. Finally, there's a lack of other formats. This is a position that I've had to defend constantly in comments and online debates, but the fact is that only having a single format where the entire modern card pool is legal is just fucking insane. When your main argument for not having set rotation in your game is that you can always play with your older cards, it sort of falls apart when your older cards have to compete against all of this. I mean, how is little Timmy supposed to play his funny Machina or Drytron deck in this sort of meta? Again, I do have to reiterate that Heart of the Underdog does help alleviate this issue, but it's ultimately a band-aid for a much larger problem. Personally, I don't understand the stigma towards alternate formats. They're a good way for people to play kitchen table Yu-Gi-Oh, and they would go a long way to foster a new casual audience of TCG players. A lot of the pushback I've seen have been from people saying that it's not real Yu-Gi-Oh, and this is just an argument that I vehemently disagree with. This basically just amounts to, I don't like this idea, and it doesn't really provide any alternative solution. But the main reason I don't like this response is because it's disingenuous. I'm not suggesting that we completely abandon the advanced format. What I'm saying is that we need more ways for people to play with the cards that they own. I don't think that's too much to ask for. Most people would like to have a space where they could feel comfortable playing with their non-meta decks. And that brings us to the crux of this video. Before we begin, I want to clarify that we don't need a Master Duel 6. Y'all can breathe easy there. The game as it is right now is more or less fine. The only thing we need to fix outright are time rules. Beyond that though, how are we going to address all these problems? For starters, I do think we need to adopt the OCG product model. It's insane that we have to spend hundreds of dollars just to even build a rogue deck. And if we had the OCG product model, players would just be able to buy booster boxes outright, since a single box would probably have all the pieces they need to construct the deck they're wanting to make. I also don't agree with the idea that it would completely crater card prices if it were handled carefully. What Konami needs to do if they adopt the OCG model in the TCG is that they need to add alt arts to the main sets and put them in the secret rare slots. This would allow secret rare prints to retain a high value, all while making alt arts more accessible to normal players. I also think that Konami should look into making extended art versions of cards for the collector rarity slot, and that these extended arts should never be reprinted at a lower rarity than they were originally released in. This would give investors insurance that these cards will hold their value, and it would give collectors something to chase for. Secondly, I think that Konami needs to understand the Yugioh TCG is a separate entity from Master Duel, and that they're not guaranteed to have players from one jump over to the other. Konami needs to just stop acting so insecure, and they need to have faith in the idea that the product they're making is able to stand on its own. Third, Konami needs to slightly lower the power ceiling of the advanced format. The end boards that people are making off of a single card are fucking insane. You shouldn't be able to do this much off of a one card combo. Stronger combos in the advanced format should be reserved for 2-card combos and should require a higher cost or investment. Beyond that, we just need to keep addressing floodgates, unfair extenders, and FTK enablers. I also think we can finally unban certain cards in the advanced format, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Finally, I think we should look into further promoting alternate formats within the community. The fact that I'm making an alternate format aside, I just think it would be a great way to get casual players back into paper Yu-Gi-Oh! And if these players end up enjoying them, then they'll have most of the staple cards they need to jump straight into normal Yu-Gi-Oh! Since formats like Junior and Domain already use the current card pool. Like, we're sitting on a fucking gold mine right now, and we aren't tapping into that potential for really no good reason at all. I don't see why Yu-Gi-Oh! Can't have the same alternate format culture as a game like Magic the Gathering. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Before I bring this video to a close, I just want to say that my feelings and arguments are driven by my love of the game. I don't want this getting misconstrued as me trying to pick fights with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community. While I was motivated to make this video due to MBT's clusterfuck of a Master Duel essay, I don't have any hard feelings towards the guy. I just heavily disagree with the arguments in his video, and I felt the need to get some things off of my chest since I've been mulling over these thoughts for almost a year now. So don't worry, MBT, you get to live another day. For now. Anyways, that about wraps up this video. If you want to be notified when the alternate format video drops, consider liking and subscribing. That video is partly a promotion for Rule Slayer format, which is a rule set that I've been working on for over 2 years now. Aside from that, I also make video game and horror related content. I just recently made an 80-minute long retrospective on Ben Drowned. It's a sequel to the Jeff the Killer retrospective I made last year, and aside from a few typos, it's probably the best video I've ever put together. I would highly recommend checking it out. However, if horror isn't your thing, you can also check out my first impression of Peripeteia, as well as my video on comfort games. Regardless of whatever you decide to watch, you're going to get my raw feelings towards these subjects. I do YouTube currently as a hobby, so I tend to get pretty passionate about the stuff I discuss. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.